Hi, my name is Gary Kendall. It's my privilege to talk to you today about some mentoring moments. And each mentoring moment has a series underneath it where we talk about individual parts of a particular subject matter. Today we're talking about drifts, the natural things in our lives that are part of our human nature, but if left unchecked, might take us into places we don't want to go. I've been using the illustration about a car and how if the wheels are a little bit out of alignment and you let go of the wheel, it might lead you into the ditch or it might drift into the other lane. I've just been calling these things drifts. I actually list them at the top of my to-do list so I can kind of every day realize I'll go this way if I'm not careful. This drift I want to talk about in this session is the drift of approval seeking. And I think this is a natural thing for all of us. All of us want to be liked. We want to be noticed. We want to be special. We want to be loved. It's inborn into human nature. And in most cases, there's nothing wrong with that. But in some cases, if left unbridled, if left unchecked, we can drift into things that are not good for us. In my life, this started early for me because I was born with a cleft palate. And so that means that the top part of my lip didn't develop when I was a baby in the womb. And so as a result, I had multiple surgeries. And the doctors tried their best to correct it, but they never could get it completely. And so young children would ask me what was wrong, or later on in grade school, people would tease me about it. And so it was something I was always conscious of. And I think one of the things that produced in me was this coping mechanism that I had to have people like me. So I tried extra hard. I tried to be funny, or I tried to be first in everything, or I wanted to be the captain of the team, or I wanted to have the solo in the choir. And I would do almost anything it took to be liked or to be noticed. And as over time, I think I developed this need for approval. I think we all have it to some degree, but I think for me it was out of balance. I was drifting in some unhealthy ways. This need for approval can wreck relationships. It can also harm your board at your church. It can make it difficult for you even as a leader in anything that you do. For me, it was even had this little twist because I thought that if people liked me, then I could be a better pastor. If people liked me and I had their approval, I could lead them better. More people would accept Jesus. My church would grow. You can add in all of these other things, but the word was always if, like if. And I discovered at some point in time that what was true about me was I always felt like that it wasn't enough to just be who I was. That if people knew the real me, then they wouldn't like me or wouldn't accept me, which wasn't true, of course, but these are the stories we tell ourselves. And so I'm going to ask you, what are the drifts in your life? One of them for me was this need for approval. So if the need for approval is strong enough, it actually becomes a bit of an addiction. So I at some point began to say, as I did some work with counselors and was working with my spouse through these things, I said, I'm just addicted to approval. Like I'll do whatever it takes to be able to help people want me, like me, choose my way. And the bad thing about that was that over time what it did is sometimes what's right or best would get lost because I was doing whatever it took to be liked. And I found that there in board meetings I would sometimes have this great crisis because on one hand I thought that we should do this, but it seemed like more of the people wanted to do this, and this need for approval would tear at me. Or sometimes when I'm leading the congregation and I have to say things that are necessary but hard, it's then I have this dilemma because I want to tone it down or soften it a bit because I want people to like me, and this need for approval would get in the way. And so I've throughout this mentoring moment series on drifts, I've tried to share with you some of the things that I think are maybe the antidotes for that. And for me to have an antidote for this, I began to think about the words of Jesus when he said this, "Abide in me, and I'll abide in you, and the same will bear much fruit. And without me, you can do nothing." And I began to realize that when I would actually slow down and abide with God, when I would sit and be quiet and be still with Him in His presence, that His approval was giving me everything I would need. And when I had His approval, I didn't have to go out and gain the approval of others. I even thought of how that Jesus, when He was tempted in the wilderness by the enemy told Him to jump off the top of the temple, and angels would save Him. I think it was like an approval-seeking kind of thing, like, see how important you are. If you jump off a temple, the angels will save you. But Jesus didn't need the approval of the enemy. He didn't need the approval of angels, because He had the approval of His Father, and He knew that. And I would find that if I would spend more time in God, even in quietness and stillness, that would help me tremendously. I thought of Jesus talking about Mary and Martha and saying, Mary chose the good thing. She's just quiet. She's sitting. She's listening. And the more I could slow myself down and be quiet with God, the more that I felt His approval. A good way to think about this is to think about the Apostle John, who would say about himself, I am the one that Jesus loved, the beloved apostle. When I would first read that story, I would think, how arrogant of John that he would call that out and draw attention to that fact. But then later I began to realize, John was onto something here, because there's one time it even says John sat with Jesus, at the Last Supper, or he laid his head on his chest. And I thought, how beautiful it is that John could lay his head on the chest of the creator of the universe, the one who is the only holy judge, and feel completely loved and accepted and approved of. Like, how great is that? That John knew he was loved. He knew he was accepted for who he was, and he just claimed it. He called it. And what I began to realize is as I would spend time with God in quietness, not trying to earn anything, not trying to do anything, but to be quiet with God, to abide with Him, to invite Him to speak His inner thoughts to me, to review the thoughts of my head and heart, I would find that I just felt right with the world. I felt right with God. I felt right within myself. And then it didn't matter what other people thought. I didn't have to seek their approval, because I already had the approval of the one that mattered most. So that helped me. I hope it helps you with approval seeking.